Hello, so today we're in Helen's office at Mansfield College in Oxford. I'm Adrian Bell. I introduce my colleague.
Hi, I'm Helen Lacey at Mansfield College, Oxford.
And we're just going to talk today, Helen. I wondered how, as historians, do we use the sources to construct stories? Is there a good example of a source and a story you can think of that shows how we can use those original sources to perhaps give a different view of a particular event?
Yeah, well, I like the story of Marjorie Tawney. It's a woman's story that we discovered when we were researching the project. And this came about from finding a petition. So one of the research assistants, Helen Killick, found a petition in this series of documents where people were allowed to petition the Crown and present these written documents which detail their request, their plea, and it's the idea of royal justice, that you're meant to be able to give a petition to the King himself and it will be dealt with, and you'll get redress of your grievance. So this petition wasn't from a rebel, and Marjorie didn't herself take part in the rebellion. So we were kind of intrigued as to why it was dated to Friday the 14th of June 1381, okay, which is actually the height of the rebellion. London's burning at the time, the Savoy Palace is being ransacked, Clerkenwell Priory is being attacked, and the King's in the Tower. So why is Marjorie's petition, dated to this important day? And then as you read Marjorie's petition, what she says in it, she makes reference to the revolt. She says that actually on the Friday, when the King and his councillors are in the Tower of London, she says she hears a proclamation, so this order given out from the King and proclaimed, literally said aloud in various places in London, that people should bring their grievances to the Tower of London and the King and his officials will hear their grievances and give them justice. So she's saying the idea in her petition is that that the King and his councillors want people to come to the Tower of London and bring their petitions as a way of kind of assuaging them and giving them what they want, and then the rebels will leave London. That's the idea. So then there's the whole story of what Marjorie petitions and so on. But for us as historians, the interesting thing there is that her account contradicts what the Chronicles said about the revolt, because they said that on that Friday, when the King and his councillors are there, they want to drive people out of London, that the rebels are burning and sacking and destroying London, and so they should do whatever they can to move them out of London back to the home counties, back to their homes and away from the capital. But Marjorie at the same time is saying they summoned them almost to the Tower. So why is that contradiction there? And then we kind of unfold the story of Marjorie a bit more and see what she was saying.
And the petition exists because it was accepted, in a sense. So she was able to present that petition, mm-hmm, and it was accepted. But how do we know the outcome of the case? Is that from other sources inform us of the outcome?
Yeah, well, we don't actually know we know what happened to... So Marjorie was with her eldest son when she tried to present the petition, and we know from other records that her son was subsequently accused of being a rebel. So again, he gets caught up in it and was a victim of it, if you like, to the extent that he was then arrested for being at the Tower at the time of the death of the Chancellor and the Treasurer, Sudbury and Hales. And then he's arrested in Southwark, he's beaten up and put in prison, and he dies of his injuries. So we know that from another record. And then we know Marjorie flees to Sanctuary because her son's just been killed and being falsely accused, so she then fears for her life. She flees to Sanctuary. That's where her story ends. But we know that her younger son then takes up the cause, and we can see in other court records in the subsequent years after the death of the eldest son that the younger brother is then taking their opponents to court, and you can see several court records where Marjorie's younger son is pursuing their claim.
I mean, that's been a fascinating find for us and tells us more about the story in London, which obviously we know is a focus. But are there other stories we can find that also illustrate, the wider impact of the revolt across the country?
Yeah, there's an interesting one from the pardon rolls. So that's my sort of particular interest coming into the project. And I was intrigued by a name that came up on the pardon rolls. The pardon rolls are quite mysterious, if you like, in that you get all of these names, but you don't get much detail as to why they decided that they wanted a pardon. And you have to sort of look into the backstory from other documents. So there was a name of a woman called Goditha, unusual name, Goditha Statham. And then when you skip through forward through the pardon rolls a bit more, you find 5 other Stathams, and they're all her sons, William and Richard and John, her sons listed. So then, you want to know why they're buying a pardon. And in their case, you can see that actually they were all involved in rebellion in Derby, or a small village called Morley, which is really close to Derby. And then that sort of expands our story of revolt and shows how the news of revolt from London had spread up to Derbyshire, and they had then attacked lands. They were a powerful gentry family, the Stathams. They weren't sort of peasants or people without money. They were local gentry, and they had a particular vendetta or kind of argument going with Gaunt, because he's the local landowner, John of Gaunt. And so they then go and attack his lands, and they attack a local priory, Bredsall Priory, and then they invade the royal castle at Horston, and they raise the flag of St George on the castle as a sort of symbol of their rebellion.
Yeah. And are we able to use other sources to sort of pad out their, because they sound fascinating, group of sons and the mother as well? Is there other ways we can look to see what they did in their lives?
Yeah, well, first of all, we find them in the records being accused of rebellion in our project. And then what we did was we're seeing 5 sons. We thought, let's check them for the soldier database. Yeah. And we see that all of her 5 sons have a military background. They'd all served at some time in the wars against France, so that's really interesting that you can find details of their service, where they went, which retinues they were in, and so on. So again, that adds to our understanding of the revolt in Derbyshire. Them raising the banner, the kind of violence that they undertook could have that sort of military inflection to it. And Goditha herself, she's a real sort of matriarch of the family, and you find her in legal records in the years after the revolt. She's still pursuing her land and her legal claims against sort of other local landowners. And you can also find her in parish records. So she gives money to the local parish church. And if you visit Morley Parish Church, you can still see the windows and the sort of church furnishings that she gave money for.
Well, that's something to put on our list of things to do. But
field trip.
Thanks, Helen. I think that's fascinating. And perhaps sometimes historians are frustrated bringing all these things together. I think the stories they tell are ever so illuminating. So thank you very much.
Thanks.